I'm Brett Baer.
I'm Maria Bartiromo.
I'm Brian Kilmeade, and this is the Fox News Rundown.
Wednesday, December 8th, 2021. I'm Lisa Brady. From Russia to the economy to the border, President Biden's critics say the U.S. is not on the right track. But is that enough to win elections?
If Republicans really do want to win the presidency and the House and Senate again, what they need to do is to put forward an agenda that merits that support, and it's a direct and stark contrast with what the Democrats are trying to do.
We speak with former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie.
I'm Dave Anthony. A Trump border policy President Biden undid is now back in effect, but not yet in one area of Texas where migrants keep surging.
We've seen a huge surge of activity out here where we are in La Joya, in the Rio Grande Valley. Border agents telling us the last 72 hours have been some of the busiest they've seen in quite some time.
And I'm Gregg, Jarrett. I've got the final word on the Fox News Rundown.
Russia denies that it's planning to invade Ukraine, but now has tens of thousands of troops near the border. And that was the backdrop for Tuesday's 2-hour video call between Presidents Biden and Putin.
President Biden was direct and straightforward with President Putin, as he always is.
National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan.
He told President Putin directly that if Russia further invades Ukraine, the United States and our European allies would respond with strong economic measures.
Sullivan also says the U.S. is prepared to do things it did not do in 2014 when sanctions were imposed after the invasion of Crimea. The U.S. has been in talks with Germany about Russia's Nord Stream 2 pipeline, recently completed but still awaiting final approvals to bring natural gas directly to Germany, bypassing Russia's traditional route through Ukraine.
If Vladimir Putin wants to see gas flow through that pipeline, he may not want to take the risk of invading Ukraine.
That pipeline has been a sore point for Republicans, critical of President Biden's decision earlier this year not to try to block its completion. Part of an overall approach, they argue, is weak.
I think so far he's been rather ineffective.
Chris Christie is the former governor of New Jersey and author of the new book, Republican Rescue. He calls Ukraine a test.
He's shutting down the Keystone Pipeline in America, but he's opening up the Nord Stream pipeline to help Russia is outrageous, and it shows another reason why he shouldn't have done that. And if, he wants to show Putin how serious he is, he'll tell him that whole thing is now open to renegotiation, because I don't think it should have happened in the first place. And that's where he should start. But he also should be getting personal, as I wrote in the book, with Putin and the people around him and all the money they're stealing from Russia and hiding around the world. We know where a lot of that money is, and we should be freezing those assets.
The Biden administration is certainly talking about the possibility of economic sanctions in coordination with allies, especially allies in Europe, as part of either a deterrent or a response if there's a further escalation between Russia and Ukraine. But to that point about coordinating with allies, do you think it would be an international crisis if Russia were to invade Ukraine? How confident are you the U.S. and its allies would step up?
Oh, look, I think they'll step up because they understand that further expansion of the Russian Empire is a huge step backwards for the world. It's an awful betrayal of the Ukrainian people. And we're going to have to, I think, along with our allies, step up because, this kind of action in Europe is not what's in the best interest of the United States or its allies across Western Europe and Eastern Europe. So I do think there'll be reaction, but he should cut that off before Putin does anything to let him know. Every one of these dictators is making a cost-benefit analysis. We need to make the cost so significant and certain that the benefits he'll get from invading Ukraine won't be worth it for him on balance.
What about other foreign adversaries? Should this administration be taking a harder line, for instance, a full boycott of the Olympics in China instead of a diplomatic boycott?
I totally agree with that. I cannot imagine that we're going to go and compete, and by competing in China, validate part of what's going on in China with people because of their religious beliefs being shepherded into concentration camps and tortured and murdered. That kind of regime is not a regime that we should be giving any international credibility to, like sending our wonderful athletes over there.
This President Biden, is facing a number of crises, not just abroad, but domestically. What do you think he needs to do to regain confidence from the American people?
I don't know whether he can at this point. He's shown his failure of confidence in Afghanistan. We've got inflation over 6%. He can't control what goes on in Congress. We've seen some of the other problems at the border where we have people pouring over the border, and he's not talking about even requiring them to be vaccinated. He's talking about giving them $450,000 per family. I mean, these are the kind of things that are completely outrageous and so beyond what the voters voted for him to do when he ran for election back in 2020. And that's one of the problems with governing contrary to the brand you ran on. He ran as a moderate, rather, someone who's going to bring the country together. Instead, he's done exactly the opposite. He's decided he's going to be Franklin Delano Roosevelt II. After he gets done doing that, he's going to look back, and what he's going to see is that independents and suburban voters all over this country have abandoned him.
I know your book, Republican Rescue, focuses on what the Republican Party needs to do and looking ahead. But I'm wondering if you think the country as a whole is as divided as Congress is right now. And if you were president, how would you try to unite the parties to get important things done?
There's no question that what voters want is campaign about the next election, not about the last election. And so in the book, the emphasis we make clear is that if Republicans really do want to win the presidency and the House and Senate again, what they need to do is to put forward an agenda that merits that support. And it's a direct and stark contrast with what the Democrats are trying to do. Now, if I were a president question, I think so much of getting things done in any legislature, and I did it for 8 years in New Jersey with a legislature of the opposite party, is you have to build personal relationships and personal trust with those members of the legislature on both sides of the aisle to get them to be willing to consider something you want to do that's even the least bit controversial. But I think if everyone did that and empowered the right spokesperson, that there would be a real chance that you could make some kind of deal with those folks.
The rest of the title of your book is Saving the Party from Truth Deniers, Conspiracy Theorists, and the Dangerous Policies of Joe Biden, which reminds me what Democrats would say about Donald Trump. Are you hoping to convince any Democrats or anti-Trump Republicans that Republicans are not truth deniers and conspiracy theorists?
Yeah, and what I'm trying to convince the Republicans who are buying into some of that stuff is that it's counterproductive for our party and for the country, that we don't want to be talking about the past anymore. I try to go through in the book in real detail why the 2020 election was not stolen, not by any stretch, and that the other conspiracy theories that occupy some of our time and attention are absolutely unworthy compared to the damage that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are trying to do to this country right now. And that's what we need to be focused on, and that's what we need to be absolutely working against every day by laying out our contrary vision for what the country should be doing. And once we do that, I think we're going to be on the road to winning back the House, the Senate, and the White House.
How hard is it, though, for the party to get past the polarization related to President Trump, especially if he does end up running again?
Well, look, it depends on what he's saying. If he continues to talk about a stolen election in 2020, it makes it much harder. If all of us are talking about the future and how we would do things differently in the country, then that's what the focus will be for voters. Voters want to hear about the issues that they care about the most. And believe me, no poll is going to show you that what voters care about the most, even Republican voters in this country, is the 2020 election, when we have 6% inflation, when we have people pouring over the southern border, when we have education going sideways in this country and parents being excluded from being an influence on their children's education. Those are the things that people are going to care about, not what the election results were in 2020.
From that standpoint, do you think that the January 6th committee, even though the Democratic leaders of it say it's a search for the truth, to the extent that it might just have an overall narrative of blaming the former president or trying to, is that going to make it more difficult to focus on the issues in the next presidential election, if not even in the midterms?
Well, look, I think Nancy Pelosi made an enormous mistake by not allowing the committee to be truly bipartisan and allowing the minority leader, as they always do, to appoint whoever he saw fit for that committee. When she decided not to do that, I think she invalidated a lot of the credibility of that committee. And I think that's a problem. I do not think that January 6th will be a determining issue in either the 2022 election or the 2024 election. And that's not to say that I think there was anything good about what happened on January 6th. It was awful and reprehensible. But I don't think by the time we get to next year's election that will be front of mind for most Americans.
What do you think will be front of mind? And as you say, the book goes into a lot of detail. It's really a blueprint for a Republican Party rescue, if you will. But what do you think will be front of mind? I mean, right now we're still hearing a lot about vaccine mandates.
Right. I'm hopeful that we'll be past that piece. I think we're going to be hearing about rising prices and inflation that are really diminishing the affordability of our country. I think we're going to hear about crime. I think crime is going to be a huge issue by next year with the type of criminal acts that are going on around the country and progressive woke legislators who are refusing to prosecute crimes. I think you're going to hear a great deal about education. As we heard in Virginia, we need to make sure that we have an educational system that provides choice for parents and involvement by parents in what their children are learning and to make sure that they're learning. Those are issues right off the bat that I think will be a large part of it, in addition to the porous southern border, in addition to us having some real stern conversations with Russia to make sure that they do not move on Ukraine.
What do you say to people who say all of those things that you just mentioned are just Republicans trying to stir things up? That, obviously the polls don't reflect this, but Democrats and the White House would say, no, things are on the right track. Well,
the president's approval ratings are in the 30s, so they could say they're on the right track, but wishing it doesn't make it so. The American people are, in all three parties, giving this president bad grades. The fact is that he's earned it because he promised to be a moderate who's going to bring the country together. He's governed like an FDR Democrat or even more liberal. A lot of people who vote for you are going to feel like they were taken to the cleaners. And that's not where you want the voters to be if you want to try to get anything done.
Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, author of the new book, Republican Rescue, Saving the Party from Truth Deniers, Conspiracy Theorists, and the Dangerous Policies of Joe Biden. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it, and come back whenever you need me.
This is Gregg Jarrett with your Fox News commentary coming up.
Migrants keep coming to America. In a surge, Republicans blame on the White House.
The Biden administration actually has no adequate information to determine the extent to which people are coming across the border by the millions to know whether or not they are bringing COVID or the Omicron variant, whatever the case may be, into the United States of America. That is completely irresponsible and extremely dangerous.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott has sparred with the feds over stopping immigrants and stopping wall construction. Arizona Attorney General Mark Brnovich has sued the administration.
People are going to die as a result of the cartel seizing control of this border.
But one Trump-era policy that went away is back because it was court-ordered. The Remain in Mexico policy. Immigrants claiming asylum need to wait south of the border while they await a hearing. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki not a fan of that.
It has imposed unjustifiable human costs, pulled resources and personnel away from other priority efforts, and failed to address the root causes of irregular migration.
But it is in effect again, or is it?
Short answer, absolutely not. And that's because it's not in effect where we are.
Bill Melugin is a Fox News correspondent. We caught up with him in La Joya, Texas.
It's being slow walked out. It's starting in El Paso. Then what we're hearing is it's going to be moved to Brownsville and then Laredo. Those are going to be the first few cities in Texas where they are rolling it out. Now, quite frankly, those are three areas where there's not a whole lot of activity going on. The biggest hotspots on the border are the Rio Grande Valley sector, where we are right now, and then the Del Rio sector. And that, the Remain in Mexico policy, has not been re-implemented yet in either of those areas. It doesn't mean it's not going to be in the future. It's just it hasn't yet. And we've seen a huge surge of activity out here where we are in La Joya, in the Rio Grande Valley. Border agents telling us the last 72 hours have been some of the busiest they've seen in quite some time. So the short answer to your question is no, we have not seen any slowdown in activity whatsoever ever since the announced re-implementation of this policy.
All right, help us with the geography. You go down there a lot. You cover this area a lot. So El Paso and Laredo versus where you are, how far away are we talking?
So El Paso is incredibly far from where we are. El Paso is in far west Texas, like right on the border with New Mexico. Laredo is more kind of in the middle of Texas. It's a few hours away from the Del Rio area. We are down in La Joya, which is about an hour away from Brownsville. Brownsville is the complete opposite side of Texas. It's southeast Texas, kind of by the Gulf of Mexico. So El Paso far west, Brownsville far southeast. We are kind of in the southeast corner near Brownsville right now where we are. Then when you snake your way further northwest up Texas, then you're going to hit Del Rio, Laredo, Eagle Pass, those different cities. It's a huge state, bunch of different sectors.
And why, where you are, La Joya, why in that valley? What is it that is more appealing for migrants and people to come here illegally there versus other places?
Well, there's a bunch of different factors, but primarily, number one, there's basically no border wall here in the hotspots. If they can just get across the river, there's no obstruction other than a limited Border Patrol force out here that's already completely overwhelmed. You go to El Paso and you'll see, I mean, I lived and worked in El Paso for 2 years out of college. They got a lot of border wall out there. It goes all the way to Hudspeth County. And that's part of the reason why they don't see a whole lot of activity the way we see it out here. You go to different parts of the border where there is, decent infrastructure with the border wall. It's not nearly as bad here in the Rio Grande Valley. I'm looking over my shoulder right now. We have one little half-mile stretch of border wall that started to get built under President Trump, but in January it was halted. And I cannot tell you how many times we've watched these illegal immigrants just come across the Rio Grande and then literally just walk around this piece of metal in the field because it's not connected to anything. So there's no resistance here. Rio Grande Valley has always been the hot spot. The city right across from us is Reynosa. It's a popular, cartel trafficking area. But it's a huge, expansive area. There's a lot of easy crossing areas on the Rio Grande, and there's basically no border wall here in certain areas where they like to cross. And
you talk about how busy it's been in the last, say, 3 days, weekend into here we are, middle of the week. How much more has the traffic been? How many more of it have come across?
So I'll give you perspective. So I just talked to a Border Patrol source out here. Just in the last 24 hours alone here in the Rio Grande Valley, they've encountered 1,810 illegal immigrants. They also had 179 gotaways in that 24-hour period. So that's a one-day snapshot. You can do the math on that. And just since October, they've already had about 105,000 encounters. That's up 165% over the same period last year. So these numbers are not slowing down. They are spiking up once again. And it's not just these family units coming across that we typically see. We're seeing a lot of runners out here. There are runners all over the place. It's been a very, very busy morning and a very busy few days out here.
All right. So we understand a family unit. What's a runner? Just someone who dashes and tries to get away? Is that all you mean?
Yeah, they're the ones who do not turn themselves in. So the difference is the family units, those are the moms, dads, little kids. You see them in all of our video where they show up usually in groups of dozens or sometimes hundreds. They look for Border Patrol. They give themselves up. They want to turn themselves in. and that because they know they'll likely be released into the country. The runners, on the other hand, are typically going to be your single adults who are subject to Title 42, so they know if they get caught, they're going to get sent back to Mexico. So they don't want to be caught, either because they know that's going to happen, maybe they have a criminal record, maybe something else, but they do not turn themselves in. They're the ones who are sneaking around wearing camouflage or dark clothing and are running, they're literally running on the border. They're sprinting, trying to get away, looking for areas where Border Patrol agents aren't there or not. And like we just saw, early this morning and yesterday, a lot of where we are here in La Jolla, it butts up against residential neighborhoods, and we often see these runners take off through these homes in these residential neighborhoods, and these guys get caught in those neighborhoods sometimes, and it's got to be pretty startling for the families who live there to have to always wonder if someone's going to come flying through your backyard at any time of the day. But the short answer to your question is the runners are the ones who refuse to turn themselves in and are actively trying to get away from Border Patrol rather than giving themselves up.
Now, Governor Gregg Abbott, a Republican, big critic of Biden policy at the border, has been doing more of his own enforcement. Do you see Texas law enforcement more now in that area or not?
Oh, yeah. I mean, a state trooper literally just drove by me as you asked that question. Yes, they are all over the place. I mean, I've even been pulled over twice. Like, they're looking for everything out here. They got state troopers all over the roads here. If you've got even the smallest little infraction on your license plate or you're speeding 5 miles over, they'll pull you over. I mean, they're looking for human smugglers. They've surged a ton of resources out here. They got boats all in the river, state troopers flying around all over the place. The National Guard is out here. There are more Texas resources than Border Patrol resources, from what I've seen, and it's pretty wild to think. It's pretty wild to think about what would be happening down here if Texas wasn't sending its own resources, because there's absolutely not enough Border Patrol personnel down here to handle this. And
is Texas apprehending anyone who crosses illegally and still putting them in that jail they had set aside? Is that still happening?
They are doing that up in Del Rio. They're not doing it down here because they don't have a jail set up, but up in the Del Rio area, yes, they currently have more than 1,000 people in jail based off criminal trespass, that sort of a thing. They're arresting single adult men. So rather than just handing these guys over to Border Patrol, they're saying, nope, we're going to do it ourselves. They're putting them in jail for criminal trespass because they feel like Border Patrol and the federal government policy is they're just going to release some of these people. And they want to send a message that if you come into Texas, you're going to be arrested and jailed. You're not going to have the red carpet rolled out for you.
And you talked to Border Patrol, these agents on the federal side. I mean, are they happy that Texas is helping? Have they said that? Obviously, Texas is putting them in jail and Border Patrol's not.
The agents love having the troopers out here. They love the help. They need it. Look, these agents, they're very frustrated. Their morale is rock bottom. They've got a job they want to be able to do, but a lot of them feel like they've been relegated to become babysitters and social workers, just filling out paperwork and watching little kids and families. Rather than, a lot of these guys want to be out on the front lines chasing down the criminals and the cartel members and the drugs and the people trying to sneak across. Instead, a lot of them are literally just doing paperwork all day long, processing family units, and they're frustrated because the federal government hasn't changed any of its policies. Nothing has slowed down, nothing has changed on their end. They're happy to have the troopers out here helping them, because if they weren't, there'd be a heck of a lot more gotaways and runners making it through, because Border Patrol cannot catch everybody. They don't catch everybody, and they certainly wouldn't have the means to catch nearly as many people as they are right now without the help from the National Guard and the state troopers.
3 months ago, the big story along the border was under a bridge in Del Rio, Texas.
The word went out that the Biden administration is not going to enforce the law, and if you're from Haiti, come to Del Rio because that means you get to stay.
Republican Senator Ted Cruz from Texas. That migrant camp was cleared out amid controversy over whether border agents hit Haitians with their horse reins. And about 13,000 of those Haitians who came here illegally were allowed to stay, leading to reports more caravans of Haitian migrants are coming.
We've been tracking the caravans. A lot of them kind of splint. They all start off in Tapachula, which is way in southeastern Mexico, kind of near Guatemala, and it's a long way to the U.S. border. They got a long way to walk. A lot of them splinter up before they get to the border. However, some of them are able to find vehicle transportation. They do move further north. I don't know if you've seen, but Yuma, Arizona is getting hit really hard right now. Parts of those caravans were trying to get there. They were were planning to gather in the Mexican state of Sonora, which is directly across from Arizona. So Yuma, if you look it up on Twitter right now, they've got over 3,000 people in their custody, 800 people camped out waiting to be processed. They're kind of overrun right now, and the thinking is some of those caravans have ended up in Yuma, Arizona right now, or at least part of them. They've got a pretty serious situation on their hands right now because Yuma's Border Patrol does not have the infrastructure or the personnel that, say, Rio Grande Valley Border Patrol does. They're much smaller over there, and they don't have the capacity for 4,000 people showing up at once.
Bill, you're based in L.A. You've probably spent a lot of days, though, in Texas this year, right? I mean, we've talked to you before. You seem to be down there a lot. It must be very familiar for you there now.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent probably, I think it's more than 120 days in Texas since May so far. Basically,
wow.
Almost the last 7 months of my, almost the last 7 months. I started at Fox News in May, and I've been out here, I think this is my 15th or 16th trip, and we usually do 1 or 2 week increments. So it's been quite a few nights in Texas so far, but it's a big story, and when you're really able to dial in on a beat like this, it's pretty fun because you start making a lot of contacts, talk to a lot of people, you start knowing places like the back of your hand. So it's a story that has to be told because there's not a whole lot of other media down here telling it.
Yeah, well, I don't know anyone else closer to the story than you, and so it's good to have you, and we'll hope to dial in with you again sometime soon. Bill Melugin, Fox correspondent based in L.A. in La Joya, Texas. Great to talk to you again. Thank you.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Fox News Radio on demand on the Fox News app. Download the app and just click listen. When you swipe left, you can listen to your favorite Fox News talk shows live. Swipe right for the latest Fox News Radio newscasts on demand. Fox News Radio on the Fox News app. Download it today. Subscribe to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com.
It's time for your Fox News commentary. Gregg, Jarrett. What's on your mind?
Instead of getting their deeply troubled son the professional help he so desperately needed, James and Jennifer Crumley bought him a gun. Ethan Crumley then used it to allegedly murder 4 students at Oxford High School in Michigan and wound 7 others. If there was ever a case that merited criminal charges against the parents of a school shooter, this is it. Their conduct, as described by the prosecutors, is the definition of recklessness and carelessness resulting in death. Under Michigan law, this constitutes involuntary murder. Evidence shows the Crumleys ignored ominous warning signs that their son Ethan was psychologically unstable and poised to commit violence. They refused demands by his school that Ethan receive professional counseling. They concealed from administrators that they had purchased him a deadly weapon and had taken him to a firing range to practice shooting it. They knew, or should have known, that their son was dangerous and posed a threat to others. The parents were told that their son was drawing pictures in class of killing people and laughing about it. They were warned that Ethan was searching the internet for ammunition while in school. His mother's response in a text message was cold and indifferent. In addition to buying Ethan a 9mm pistol just days before he fired at least 30 rounds in the hallways of his school, they failed to properly secure the gun from their 15-year-old son, despite all the warning signs that he might use it to harm others at school. The Crumleys also took no precautionary steps to determine whether Ethan had brought the gun to Oxford High on the very day they were summoned there for a conference to discuss his aberrant behavior. Did they inform school officials they had just bought him a gun and taught him how to use it? No. Did they suggest their son be searched or his backpack inspected? No. They insisted he remain in school that day, covering up all that they knew, and the result was deadly. Jennifer Crumley must have known that her son was capable of the carnage he inflicted. Minutes after he opened fire, police say she texted him, quote, "Ethan, don't do it." This is incriminating evidence of her own complicity. In totality, such grossly negligent conduct by the parents certainly qualifies as criminally negligent homicide, otherwise known as manslaughter. The parents should be held accountable for their despicable behavior. The Crumleys will have their day in court to contest the charges against them, and they are, of course, presumed innocent until proven guilty. But defending the indefensible will be a challenge. They are morally responsible for the tragic shooting. It will be up to a jury to decide whether they are criminally culpable. I'm Gregg, Jarrett, Fox News.
You've been listening to the Fox News Rundown. Stay up to date by subscribing to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com. And for up-to-the-minute news, go to foxnews.com. From the Fox News Podcasts Network, download and listen to Tyrus and Tim. Every week, Fox Nation host Tyrus and Fox News contributor Kat Tim give their hot takes, explore weird headlines, and share amusing stories. Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com.
Love Fox News? Click the subscribe button to get more of the news and opinion you trust. And click the Fox News Rundown playlist for the latest episodes.